So, namaskar friends and welcome once again. So, in the previous lecture we were talking about what causes stress, how our Indian knowledge system provides a framework to understand stress. While we always look at it from the modern perspective to be caused by external factors, in our discussion we saw that it is coming from within and is manifested outside. In this particular lecture, we are going to talk about inner regulation for outer leadership, meditation, breath and balance. Now, when there is stress and we identify that yes, we have stress and this stress is caused by inner disturbance, cognitive, emotional and otherwise, how to take control of that, that is also very important. So, when we talk about leadership, leadership is often framed as the ability to influence, direct and manage others. Yet this outward orientation overlooks a more fundamental reality. Every act of leadership emerges from an internal state. So, we are going into a practical domain. Now, leadership is one of the most important roles that we take, and if there is stress or cognitive dissonance in decision making, leadership will be in some kind of crisis. So, decisions, communication, judgment and even ethical positioning are not neutral outputs. They are shaped by the quality of attention, emotional regulation and clarity of the mind from which they arise. To say that leadership is about managing others without addressing the state of the self, that is managing, is to treat symptoms while ignoring causes. So, friends, if you do not have a control over yourself, you cannot probably control others. So, Indian knowledge systems, particularly texts like Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, shift the focus from external action to internal regulation. The emphasis is not merely on what one does, but on the condition of consciousness from which action proceeds. So, meditation and pranayama in this context are not auxiliary or spiritual practices detached from professional life. Sometimes we find people saying that these are belonging to a particular religion, so we do not do it, or these are spiritual practices, we are professionals, we do not need them. They function as methods of cultivating attentional stability and emotional equilibrium, but now it has been proved in researches as well that they help us a lot in our professional life. They help us maintaining our attentional stability. They also help us find emotional equilibrium, and thus they enable the individual to act without being dominated by fluctuating mental states. Fine. So, chitta vritti, we do not get overpowered by our chitta vrittis, that is the fluctuations of our mind. Breath becomes a tool for interrupting reactivity. Meditation becomes a discipline for observing and refining thought processes. So, we all know that meditation, stress, yoga, they have been wonderful in regulating our emotions, in bringing inner peace and inner equilibrium. So, in the previous class we talked about stress. Even in stress management, these practices are very effective. As a leader, you are supposed to take decisions that are not based on emotional impulsive considerations, but that are balanced, that are rational. So, maintaining your inner calm, maintaining that emotional poise for you is very, very important. Together we find that this meditation and breath pranayama, they create the conditions for what may be called inner balance, a state in which perception is clearer, responses are measured and decisions are less distorted by immediate pressure. So, this reframing challenges the prevailing assumptions that leadership can be developed solely through behavioral training. So, we have seen that lot of leadership training programs are organized and there we are given lessons in training, but we are not trained how to keep calm when presented with tumultuous situations, how to keep our mental balance when receiving bad news. So, it suggests instead that without inner regulation, external skills remain fragile, effective in controlled conditions, but unreliable under strain. So, whatever we learn as part of those leadership training programs helps us in some of the defined controlled environments, but the moment we come across certain crises that we have never anticipated, we are not able to control them. So, to manage others without managing oneself is to operate from instability. So, if you want to be a teacher, first of all you educate yourself. Unless and until you have knowledge, you cannot probably teach others. That applies here as well. Before managing others, self management is very, very important. Before disciplining others, self discipline is important. So, Yogasthaḥ Kuru Karmāṇi, established in inner steadiness, perform action. What is important? Inner steadiness. If you are firm, your decisions will be firm. If you are calm, composed, balanced, neutral, objective, your decisions will certainly have a bearing of your mental state. So, this verse offers a radically different foundation for action than what contemporary leadership and productivity cultures tend to assume. It does not merely advise action, nor does it glorify detachment in isolation. Instead, it reconfigures the very sequence of action by insisting that one must first be established in a state of inner steadiness, that is Yogasthaḥ, before acting. So, you must be in the right frame of mind to make right decision. So, it challenges the dominant assumption that effectiveness can be achieved through external training alone. It suggests that without addressing the instability of the acting subject, techniques of communication, strategy or decision making remain inherently fragile, functional in controlled settings, but unreliable under pressure. And that is why, friends, we definitely need some kind of training in communication, strategy, decision making, but we also need training in self regulation, something that keeps us controlled, something that teaches us emotional control and emotional intelligence. To act without being established in balance is to allow circumstances to dictate response. To act from steadiness is to introduce deliberation into inevitability. So, you will not be, if you are steady, you will not be affected by external factors or temporary situations, rather your action will be based on proper thinking and will not be affected by these fleeting sensations of that particular moment. Meditation, what is meditation? Lot of talk is there. This is the skill of attention. Meditation is often misrepresented either as withdrawal from action or as a quick technique for relaxation. So, somebody comes and tells you to meditate, close your eyes, fix your attention on a certain point, do like this, and at that point in time you feel relieved from your troubling thoughts for the moment, and you believe that this is what we call meditation. But meditation is not that. It brings about cognitive structural changes in you. So, both these views, that it is a withdrawal from action or it is a quick technique to fix your fleeting mind, they are inadequate. In classical terms, as articulated in Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, meditation is a discipline of attention, a systematic training of the mind to become less scattered, less reactive, and more capable of sustained observation. So, to train attention is to recognize that the mind left unexamined does not passively receive reality. It fragments it through distraction, overlays it with prior conditioning, and reacts before understanding. What meditation does is it organizes our mind. It is not fragmented. It intervenes at the level of creating a space between perception and response, where observation is possible without immediate identification or judgment. So, this challenges the assumption that thinking more leads to clarity. In practice, much of what passes for thinking is repetitive mental noise driven by habit rather than insight. Meditation does not add more content to the mind, it reduces unnecessary cognitive movement, allowing discernment or buddhi to function with greater precision. So, what does it do? It does not add more ideas to your mind, rather it helps you identify the right ideas that are already there in your mind, and in that way it clears the cobwebs that you may be having and see through the things clearly in the right perspective, and ultimately that helps you take right decision. So, in contemporary leadership context, this has direct implications. Many failures in communication and decision making arise not from the lack of knowledge, but from inattention and premature reaction. Listening in order to respond rather than to understand, deciding under the pressure of internal noise rather than external clarity. Meditation, when practiced consistently, strengthens the ability to hold attention steady, which in turn enables deeper listening, more coherent thinking, and a reduction in impulsive responses. So, when you meditate, you are in a much better frame of mind to receive what others want to convey and to convey what others need to listen to. So, meditation should be understood not as an isolated practice session, but as a continuity of attention across contexts. From formal sitting to active engagement, it works everywhere. Its contribution to leadership is neither mystical nor automatic, it is incremental. So, you may have come across people who practice meditation on a regular basis, and they say that this has brought about dramatic changes in the way they look at things, the way they process their ideas, and the way they take their decisions. So, it is incremental, demanding, and dependent on sustained practice, but one or two sessions will certainly not be enough to bring about those structural transformations or cognitive changes in you. What it offers is not perfection, but a shift in baseline from scattered awareness to relative steadiness, from automatic reaction to considered response. Breath, the threshold between impulse and awareness. Indian traditions place breath at the center of self regulation, not because it is mystical, but because it occupies a unique position. It is both involuntary and voluntarily modifiable. The assumption here is subtle but profound. The mind does not operate independently of the body, it is patterned through it, and breath becomes the most immediate point of intervention. Breath disrupts a common modern illusion that cognition alone governs behavior. Much of what we call reaction, like anger, anxiety, urgency, it is not purely mental, it is embodied activation, often preceding conscious thought. So, the quickening of breath, the tightening of the chest, the shift in rhythm, these are not consequences of emotion alone, they are also conditions that sustain and intensify it. So, pranayama means controlling your breath. It does not eliminate emotion, nor does it promise constant calm, rather it introduces the possibility of interrupting escalation. So, you might find people saying that whenever you are in excess of anger, please take a few breath, deep breath, it will calm down your mind and senses and you will come back to your normal self. So, contemporary culture both neglects and exploits this insight in partial ways. On the one hand, high pressure environments normalize shallow irregular breathing as a byproduct of speed, multitasking and constant stimulation. On the other, breath work is often repackaged as a quick fix, reduced to techniques for immediate relaxation or productivity enhancement. Breath is not a tool to be used only in moments of stress. It is a continuous indicator of one's internal state and a means of cultivating stability over time. Without sustained awareness, techniques remain episodic, unable to counter deeply ingrained patterns of reactivity. If you believe that a few sessions will help bring changes to you, to your activity, to your reactions, no, it is something that has to be done continuously to help you. In leadership and contemporary professional contexts, the capacity to notice and regulate breath becomes a practical form of self governance. It creates a minimal but crucial gap between stimulus and response, allowing action to be shaped by consideration rather than impulse. So, the work to work with breath is to intervene at the earliest point of disturbance, and that is why this is so important. In many classical formulations, including the Bhagavad Gita, equilibrium is tied to effective action. But read against the grain, this raises a sharper point. Balance is valuable because it makes the subject reliable under pressure. It produces a person who can endure conflict, perform duty and remain internally stable while navigating instability. So, that is not just a spiritual ideal, it is also a functional requirement in any structured system, whether political, economic or institutional. We trust those people who show consistency of behavior. So, balance can be seen as a technology of the self. It minimizes disruption, it stabilizes performance, it absorbs shock without breakdown. The question then is not whether balance is good, but whether it is disciplining you into endurance. Fine. So, we do not have to look at it as a source of good, something that does something good to us, rather we have to look at it as a wonderful mechanism for endurance, building resilience, building endurance, and finding right kind of action in the moments of crisis. Even in traditions like yoga, which appear inward and liberatory, balance often operates through regulation, regulation of breath, regulation of posture, regulation of thought. While this can produce clarity, it also subtly trains the individual to self correct continuously, to monitor and adjust rather than to resist or rupture. The body becomes something to align, the mind something to steady, disturbance sometimes something to resolve. Much of contemporary life is not merely imbalanced, it is structurally disorienting. To respond by cultivating personal balance can inadvertently shift attention away from the conditions that produce instability in the first place. So, if we can address the root cause of this kind of instability, probably we will be finding the right balance. In that sense, balance risks becoming a private solution to public disorder. A balanced person is one who does not deviate too far, does not react too strongly, does not disrupt continuity. Balance is not a state to achieve, it is a mechanism that shapes how you respond to pressure. So, it is something that is desirable, something that is a must, I would say. Sometimes it protects you, sometimes it contains you. The critical task is not to maintain balance, but to recognize when you are being asked to be balanced and why. So, recognizing that moment when you have to keep a balance, and a balance between your impulsive reaction and your rational thought, if you can really identify that, probably that will help you a lot. So, friends, in this lecture we talked about meditation, pranayama and yoga as wonderful tools that can help us if we want to be effective leaders. Why? Because the self before the society, that should be the motive. If we want to change the society, the charity has to begin from home itself. That means we need to change ourselves first. So, if we have to control others or take right decisions or manage affairs, the same applies to us first. First we need to learn how to control ourselves, how to balance ourselves and how to organize ourselves, and then only we can do or accomplish tasks that have been assigned to us as leaders. In the previous class also we discussed how the inner state culminates in outer disposition. So, a leader who is balanced from inside is the leader who will take a balanced approach to things and will take a balanced decision. So, thank you very much friends for your kind attention. We will continue our discussion further. Thank you very much.